Hey there, Suzi here. Before we get into today's episode, I want to share this special message with you. Now, my co-host Michelle and I love masterminds. Not only do we belong to masterminds, but we also host a mastermind. We started it almost 8 years ago, and it is the premier mastermind for women business owners who want to grow their business with a specific focus on marketing. Now, this group is usually completely booked out, and very occasionally we open the doors and invite a handful of women in. So if you're growing your business, but you're struggling with feeling overwhelmed, or like you constantly have a split focus when it comes to your marketing, this could be exactly what you're looking for. We have an amazing time together, and the women in the group are extraordinary. They're great cheerleaders, supporters, advisors, and colleagues for you. And they're also seeing extraordinary results. We see people cracking the $1 million, $2 million, $3 million mark, launching new e-commerce sites that go from $0 to $10,000 a month in sales. They're doubling their conversion rates, they're growing memberships, they're selling courses, they're growing their personal brands, and they're getting all kinds of media exposure and speaking opportunities and so much more. You can learn more about the mastermind and join the wait list over at herbusinessmastermind.com. We're going to open the doors soon, so you definitely want to be on the list to get an invitation. So head on over to herbusinessmastermind.com. Hi, you're listening to the Content Sales Podcast, the show all about how to create content to attract, convert, and keep your ideal clients. Welcome to episode 220. I'm Suzi Dafnis, and here with me is my co-host, Michelle Falzon. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
Yes, Suzi, I am great. Thank you so much. Today, we're talking about something that's a bit of content. It's a bit of an old content marketing chestnut. You know, there was a time whenever you saw a content marketer on a speaker lineup, they would talk about this. This would be their topic. But while we've touched on it in numerous ways, and we have done a couple of episodes where we've interviewed people who are doing this, you and I have never actually done a show just dedicated to this topic.
How's that possible in 220 episodes?
I've got no idea.
But you're right. That old chestnut we're talking about is repurposing content. And I know what you mean, especially in the early days of content marketing. Seems like people thought that is what it was really about. Take a blog post, turn it into 5 social posts and 3 videos, and, you know,
voila. You've done content marketing.
You've done content marketing. And while we do definitely want to be efficient with our content production, if you're a long-time listener of the show, you're going to know that we're all about being very strategic with our content creation. So not creating content just for content's sake.
You know, you're speaking my language there, Suzi. I agree with you 100,000 million %. And, you know, you've heard us both say this many times on the show. Every piece of content needs to know where it fits in terms of attracting, converting, and keeping those ideal clients of yours. So is it going to fit into the runway? That is the content that is really leading up to a launch. So you're creating content that's all about helping people know, like, and trust you as you warm up your audience before a campaign or before you're going to ask them to buy something from you. Is it that you are creating content or looking at repurposing content to build an email sequence with this value add sort of inspirational or informational ideas in it, plus a strong call to action? And maybe you're sending that email sequence after someone has opted in for your ebook or your lead magnet to get them to come to your webinar or take whatever that next step is, where you're going to make an offer for somebody to buy from you. That is the content kind of fitting into some pre-organized pathway that is moving people forward from that attract, convert, and keep kind of movement? Maybe it's a regular newsletter that keeps you in touch with your list so you can deliver multiple offers to people and show that window onto your paid program. So you're always getting people wanting to join your membership or your course or your coaching program. Every single piece of content has a conversion job. Even if that specific piece of content isn't actually asking someone to buy right then and there, it's not saying, hey, buy my thing. It's still got a conversion job, and you need to know where it fits in the overall process of getting someone to buy from you, from that attraction and getting their attention through getting them considering whether you are a viable alternative, through to that really important conversion stage where they do become a customer, and then beyond as you inspire customer loyalty and even get them to become advocates for you as they refer and generate new customers for you through word of mouth. So all that to say, no matter how efficient your content creation is, and we're going to be talking about being efficient and repurposing today, if you're just creating content for the sake of having a weekly blog or sending a weekly email or posting 5 times a week on Instagram because you read that was a good thing to do, chances are you're working too hard making content that's not turning into results for you. And that all comes back to a mantra that we've been chanting for years here on the show. We're 220 episodes in, and that is no content without conversion.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. Yes to that. Yeah, you make such really great points there, is that we can get into this content creation wheel. And even when we think about repurposing, it's just to get more. But without that strategic approach, it's really just spinning our wheels, and likely we're not going to see the results that we want. And as we head into this episode, just know that while we're talking about repurposing strategies, it's really with this big caveat in mind, which is first you want to make sure the content you're creating is strategic and that you know where it fits into what Michelle was talking about. And how it fits in terms of its conversion job. What is it designed to do? You always need to be able to answer the question, what is the heavy lifting that this specific piece of content is doing to get me more customers and more sales? And if you can't answer that question, then you may want to consider dropping what you're doing from your workload. There's lots of other things you could be doing. And Michelle, I know there are many things I see business owners doing that are keeping them exhausted and taking their precious time, or that they're paying others to do. They're outsourcing. But that activity is not moving the needle at all. And we're always on the lookout for that here at Her Business. Does every piece of content that we create have a clear place in our marketing strategy? Is it either directly or as part of a process, indirectly leading to a sale, either immediately or down the line, but it's very purposeful. And I get it that we can be doing things for weeks or months or even years and kind of go into autopilot around it and forget why we started doing it in the first place. And it may no longer be relevant. And I know I've had to pull myself up at times where a team member would say, why do we do this? And I'm like, yeah, you know what? We started doing that. It's probably no longer a great use of our resources. Maybe we don't need to do that. But to give you an example, we've been sending a newsletter to our Her Business Network members for more than 28 years. So it used to be a printed newsletter. It used to be a printed newsletter. I know, that's a long time. So every Thursday for 28 years, we've sent a newsletter, come rain, hail, or shine. And there's been numerous times over the years where I've had to seriously consider, is it still worth doing it? What is the heavy lifting that it's actually doing? Is anyone even actually reading it? And we've had several iterations and changes and approaches with the newsletter as its conversion job inside Her Business changed and evolved. And we've gotten really clear on what its purpose is. And sometimes it was more effective than other times. But the point is, don't just keep doing something because you've always done it. And right now, our newsletter does several heavy lifting jobs. The main one being that it's a great retention tool for our existing members. Every week, we feature members and their offers. We remind people of all the great perks that they're getting this week, this month. And we have a growth zone focus. So inside of Her Business, we have 8 areas of business that we teach to year round and that we provide resources for. And this growth zone, we focus on each month. So that increases engagement in the activities that we do around this topic. So we might do a masterclass around this topic. So that's a piece of content. We might do a monthly challenge. We might provide a curated list of things to watch, listen to, read, download, things like templates and worksheets. And we use a newsletter to remind people about these resources that we have for them. We also remind them about their growth groups. These are our peer-to-peer accountability groups that help members have a sounding board and an advisory board of their own. And we let them know that we are going to send them a book club book. This is something we do 3 times a year so that our members don't have to scour bookshelves to stay up to date with business trends. We let them know the amazing events we have coming up. So it really is the news of what they need to know about in order to up-level their skills as a CEO in their business. Plus, we get to promote whatever other offers we're making to members who always get special discounts on things like our Reach Retreat in Hawaii, which is coming up in October, our Her Business live event, courses that we might run, like the mastermind experience that Michelle and I run together, or we might have a few spaces available inside of our mastermind, and we put all that in the newsletter. But if at any point I felt like it wasn't doing that job, I would definitely consider stopping it, because it takes hours of our time to actually write the content, to do the design, to liaise with members to get their offers and so on, to proofread, to check, to update, to create special images. You know, there's a lot. So it needs to be worth it.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you're saying there, Susie. And just again, a massive hat tip for 28 years of sending out a newsletter. Talk about incredible. So, yeah, I agree. We absolutely need to be pragmatic about our content because we just can't do everything. And I just see people trying to do everything, and it kind of breaks my heart because they're running around crazy, like you were saying, and not really moving the needle. So this is where I think repurposing can really be powerful, because when you have a good strategy, when you're doing all those things Susie was just saying, you're making sure that what you are sending out is still fits in, still has a conversion job, and you know where that content fits and what messages are going to resonate with your audience, you want to be as efficient as you possibly can about then creating that content. So it's not about just madly, wildly creating all the things, but once you know what are the things to create, let's use repurposing to make that more effective. And if you're listening now and you're someone who does not like to write, or maybe you don't like to be in front of a camera, or maybe you are lamenting posting on social, do I really have to be on all these platforms? We think you're really going to love a couple of the ideas we have today, because repurposing really can allow you to play to your strengths when it comes to creating content and not necessarily have to dig into areas that you don't find as easy, or that you're not in as much flow state, or that are just, take more time for you to be generating your content in. So what I mean by that is you can originate the content in a format that works best for you. So whatever you find comes easiest for you. For some of us, that's writing. So like I've been doing writing for more than 30 years and it comes really easy to me. I can usually write finished output as fast as I can think it these days, but that's after years of practice. But others absolutely hate writing and would rather talk it out on a Facebook Live, kind of unpacking what they're thinking in real time and kind of getting to the end and going, wow, that was pretty great. I didn't know I thought that. And others really thrive when making a presentation with slides, or walking and talking into their voice recorder on their phone, or recording a coaching or a teaching session and extracting good stuff from there. And it's really about finding how you want to originate the content in a way that's the easiest for you. And then you can repurpose into all of these other kind of places and spaces from that original content. So I have a client who likes to, the thing that's easiest for them that they've found after all these years is that they like to talk it out with me. So we get on a Zoom, I hit record, they start unpacking kind of what their process is. I ask a bunch of questions. We kind of do a bit of ideation together. They do this thing kind of called copy speak, which is literally just kind of starting to talk out what they might say in real life. So they're very an auditory kind of processor. And then I go from that conversation to creating their IP and their frameworks and their programs. And you might find that also, that there's a trusted person or a member of your team or somebody that you hire from time to time who can take your thoughts and pull them together for you. So whatever works for you, that can be your original or your source content. And you can create pretty simple systems to then take that source content and turn it into various formats and outputs through this repurposing kind of process.
I love that example there of, knowing yourself well enough to know what feels like there's too much friction, therefore I'm not creating any content. Or every time I sit down, I try to write a blog post and it's like, ugh, I don't want to do that, And so really finding what works for you. And I know when we've worked together creating new things, you write as fast as you think, which is fast. Whereas for me, I'm also a little bit more, I just need to talk it through, and then some thread of something useful will come out of that, but I need to kind of unpack it. Whereas if I go to a blank page, it's not usually a great place for the content to originate. So if I think about it, I have a few things I really don't like doing and a few things that I feel ambivalent about. And if I had to pick a format where I'd like to originate most of my content, it is our podcasts. And that's because I find them easier than to do videos or write blog posts. In fact, if I'm interviewing someone, that is like heaven. That doesn't even feel like work to me. And this is like a note to self. So a podcast can turn into a blog post, an article, a marketing email, a social post, a Facebook Live. It's even turned into a cheat sheet or a worksheet that we can then reuse to generate leads. But it comes from this source that I know is aligned to something we're teaching inside of her business, something we have coming up, a conversion goal that we have in mind. And so when I'm planning a podcast, I'm looking out ahead as like, okay, if this is coming up, if you said runway earlier, if this is coming up there, what do I need to be thinking about and talking about and seeding in my content now? And, it's a process.
I love that. And that's a great example of being strategic, right? Like thinking about what campaigns do I have coming? My happy place is podcasting. I'm going to make my podcast kind of that source content. So I better make sure the podcast is really lining up with my campaigns. And I just wanted to pick up on something you said there, because I agree. You are an amazing interviewer. And when you are interviewing people, you can tell you're in your happy place, and it feels different, right? Like the stuff that's a slog, we know it's a slog. The stuff that feels easy, we know it feels easy. We feel it in our bodies. So maybe as you're listening right now, and you're rattling through all the different kinds of content formats and ways that you've tried to originate content, there may be one just bubbling up for you right now that just you go, oh, I can exhale if I think all I have to do is that, and I can repurpose from there.
And one of the things we've seen is that it can actually be really profitable to repurpose your content. And a few episodes back now, we had a fabulous guest in Ruth Basinski, and she showed us in that episode, which is one of our most popular ever. I'm referring people to it all the time. It was episode 170, and it was called Repurposing Your Content and Making More with Less. And listen to this. Where she was making the profit was here. She went from making $3 million in sales with her online program, which is already awesome, right? Who wouldn't want that? But she moved that to 18 million in sales without creating any new content. She simply repurposed that main program into a range of new products and programs. So she didn't take it and create blog posts and freebie things. She actually took that program and created other programs that she sold, new products, new programs. So that's an additional, from 3 to 18, an additional 15 million in sales, and more than 500% increase in revenue with just one repurposing strategy that she has so dialed in. And I strongly recommend that you check out that episode. If you haven't already, we'll put a link to it in the show notes, and I'll tell you where to find the show notes later on. But she has it so dialed in, and she was so generous in sharing how she did that. She also shared how the inspiration for her repurposing strategy was something she learned from Ryan Deiss of Digital Marketer. And she shared an analogy that does a really great job explaining this idea of repurposing. Now, in Ryan Deiss's analogy, he asked his students to imagine a turkey dinner for Thanksgiving. And so for our American listeners, of course, you know what Thanksgiving is. But if you're not familiar with Thanksgiving, it's a holiday celebrated in the US where a big turkey dinner is the traditional meal. Now, the turkey is typically baked in the oven and served with all the trimmings. I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. It's what we call here in Australia a baked dinner. And so that's the original product, the full turkey dinner with all the trimmings. And then the next day after Thanksgiving, it's quite common to then make turkey sandwiches, cut off some more of the meat, make some sandwiches. And then as the meat gets a little leaner on the bone, perhaps the smaller pieces get combined into a turkey pie. And then finally, you can actually make a broth with the turkey bones from the final pieces and the meat that's still left on the bones. And that process of going from the big turkey dinner to the sandwiches to the pie and finally the broth is one way to think about repurposing, breaking something big up into smaller and smaller parts, which is exactly what Ruth does with great impact with her core program. And she does that with paid content-related products. You can also do that with content that you use for marketing. So, for example, you might create a lengthy, detailed blog post as your turkey dinner and then make several Facebook posts that you share over time linking to a longer blog post. So that would be equivalent to your turkey sandwiches. And then you might take each of those Facebook posts and make a short video about each, or a Facebook Live. That could be the turkey pie. And then finally, the turkey broth might be that you make a bunch of visual quotes taken for the blog that you share as nicely designed images on social media. Now, when I say you, what Michelle was indicating earlier is like, yes, you may make the core content, but a lot of the rest of it, making the sandwiches, making the pie, making the soup, that can all be leveraged. And of course, it's also possible to go the other way, starting with the smallest pieces of content and expanding out from there, right, Michelle?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess this is where the turkey analogy doesn't hold anymore. It's very hard for that turkey to reconstitute itself. But absolutely, right? And this is something we covered in our very, very first episode of the Content Sells podcast, where we talked about this idea of the content octagon. And it's really a way to think about your entire content universe. And I'm not going to go into all of that today. If you want to just check out, Suzi's always been a fantastic podcaster. If you want to check out me kind of figure out what the heck is going on, go back and listen to that first episode. But I'll cover the part that's relevant of the content octagon here. And it's this idea of going from something kind of smaller and reverse engineering into something bigger. So the idea is that there's kind of these universal elements to your content world. And one of the important pieces is that you have your IP, that is your intellectual property. And this is your area of genius or thought leadership, or a place you've invested a lot of time and effort learning and building your skill set in. It includes things like your thoughts, your processes, your research, maybe a degree if you have one, your bolt of inspiration, your experience, some data you might have, results in raw format. It could be things, what's in your head, notes in your head, random notebooks you've been filling out, all kinds of things. So there's this sort of intellectual property. It's kind of like all of the flotsam and the jetsam is kind of one of the ways that I want to put this, of your experience, your knowledge. Now, for example, Kath Cosgrave, one of our masterminders, she has a degree. She actually has a PhD, a doctorate. Now, you don't have to have a doctorate to have intellectual property. Anybody, all of us have intellectual property, but she's just the example that I'm going to mention. Now, she's obviously done a ton of research to get her doctorate, and she specialises in helping regional health providers and organisations to really thrive. So she's got a stack of this great raw material and research data, and obviously her own thought leadership that she can use as the basis of her intellectual property. So that's kind of like the first sort of smaller piece. Now, if we expand out from that raw material, you can translate that intellectual property into core content that is uniquely yours. Now, this core content can include things like models or diagnostics or data compiled into tables or diagrams or some sort of sense-making kind of visual. Processes that have been codified into steps or stages. Maybe it's instructions or specifications, or even things like stories and analogies and metaphors, frameworks. All of these things kind of become your core content. And that's, again, exactly what Kath has done to continue our example. So she has all this raw material that is her research data, that's her intellectual property. But then she created a groundbreaking framework for regional health services that really enabled them to be more effective, that came from all of that research, that came from all of that experience. Now, this is a framework that's unique to her and her brilliance. And it's kind of a core framework she can use for lots of other things.
I love that. And I know that you said, look, it was our first episode, but really it still holds all these episodes later. It's still a great way to think about your content, and this idea of having something core, then you have these almost spindles off of. So in our business, an example of that core content is the 8 business growth zones that I mentioned earlier. Now, these are 8 areas that any successful business has working for them, and it includes things like planning, products and services, people, money, marketing, systems, and you. And that's the growth zone that is around your grit, your resilience, your mindset, all those sorts of important things. And so we've got a visual framework for that, and it's a key philosophy and teaching model for everything we do here inside of her business, and it really underpins our core offering to our members.
Yeah, that's such a great example, and it is such a fantastic framework. And it's this word core, C-O-R-E, that is sort of the really big important word to pick up here, that you take this core content, this fundamental kind of wonderful idea, framework, process, model, and then from there you can create what we call a content bridge. Now, these are specific communication materials and products made by drawing on your core content and your intellectual property, and then kind of figuring out, well, what does my specific audience need to see this? What might they need to see this inside, or what framework might they need to see it? Like, what specific output might they need to see it in? What specific campaign might I need to create this for? What's the conversion job? Remember, we talked about every piece of content needs to have its own conversion job. So you can have this core content that remains the same. Suzi's 8 business growth zones don't change. They are the truth is the truth is the truth. But then she can create all kinds of different bridges to communicate that. And a bridge could be an ebook, it could be a Facebook Live, it could be a course, it could be anything that you use to sort of package up that content. So to continue Kath Cosgrave's example, that core framework that she's created has tons and tons of applications. She could use it as a visual for an infographic. It could be the basis for a TED Talk if she wanted to get into the TED stage, or a webinar. It could be the foundation of a 30-day paid program. It could be a social media post, so tiny or big. So you can go as big or as small as you like in terms of the content bridges you make from that core content. And you can make multiple bridges from one piece of core content. That's kind of the beauty of it. So in Kat's case, she uses her core framework as the basis for a number of paid programs and presentations.
I love that we're talking about Kath. Kath just recently joined our mastermind program, and I'm just so excited about what she's going to do. She's already got some great pieces in place. What she's going to do now that she's in our hands, Michelle.
Oh, cannot wait. Love it. We'll put a link to Kath. She's awesome. If you have any opportunities for her in the regional health space inside of Australia, or you want to maybe connect with her, we'll put her link into today's show notes.
Yeah, that'd be great. And so what Michelle was just talking about is what we've done as well. So we've created lots of different bridges that draw on our 8 growth zones framework. So for example, we have a diagnostic that helps businesses see how they rate in each of those 8 zones. And every month we focus on one of these zones inside of the Her Business Network, and we provide additional resources for members. So for example, this month we're focused on the sales and marketing growth zone. So we've brought together existing content that we had in our library that fits to that growth zone. We've curated some specific pieces of things to listen to, things to watch, things to download, things to do. And we've made a new content bridge that is this month's challenge to help women start to measure a few things, like the number of emails they're sending this month, the visitors to their website, the reach on their social media, so they can track and measure their progress forward. So we had some content already in the library that we're bringing to the fore, but we also created some new content very strategically aligned to have them use that content that we already have. And so having this framework, the core content of the growth zones, helps us think about what new content bridges to create. It gives us a way to organize our thinking. So instead of creating all kinds of random content, we're always thinking about how can it fit into the core framework of the growth zones. And so inside of our Her Business Hub, which is our online library where we store and archive all our trainings and resources, they're organized by these growth zones. Right? So there's a language, it's a common language, our members understand it. And it helps us organize our thinking, as I said. So as we approach each month's focus, we'll look at whether we have more than enough already, or perhaps there's some new resources that we need to add to our Her Business Hub, because perhaps, the zone is technology, and maybe there's some great new technology that people should be using that the last time we looked at this wasn't available. And so maybe we'll create a resource for that. So even with this podcast, when we plan our annual episodes, and we are thinking that far in advance with our content, we're thinking about how can we time the topics of the episodes so that they're most relevant to the growth zone that we're focused on that month inside of Her Business. Now, we can only do that because we plan out what zone we're going to be focused on each month, and we plan out our episodes. So that's going back to what we were saying earlier about being strategic. Because sustainability in business, sustainability with content marketing is repurposing for sure, but it's also really keeping the end in mind and having a strategic approach to your content marketing. The other thing I wanted to say was that we leverage the podcast because we do that, because we pre-think, well, what episode should be coming out during, this month, because this is the growth zone. So we can use the content that's already there, and we can also have some fresh new content.
I absolutely love this strategy with the podcast. We are making this podcast anyway. So let's match the publication schedule of the podcast up with your growth zones and when they're getting published inside of Her Business Network. And then you'll always have a new meaty podcast,
Right.
you can add to that month's resources. So just, I hope you kind of got the gold Suzi just gave you in terms of what she's doing inside her membership, which is every month there's this growth zone to focus on. And so there's content that's being, put in front of people and curated based on what they need to understand this month. Like there's hundreds of fantastic resources inside of the Her Business Hub, but actually if you're going to focus on sales and marketing, here are the 3 you really want to be looking at right now, or here are the 5 you really want to be looking at right now. But then you want to have something new in the mix as well. And so why go and make something entirely new when you're already going to be making a new podcast episode that month, tie that in. And this is a way to think about repurposing that I think people don't always connect the dots on. It's really good to look at what you're already doing and see how you can kind of really leverage that and use it in multiple ways. Because here's the thing, you do not need to create heaps and heaps of intellectual property or core content. So you don't need to go and reinvent the wheel and do a PhD in 10 different topics or go and do all this amazing kind of research and, soul searching and all of these things. You don't need to have 20,000 different models. In fact, I think that's where most people get caught up and create issues for themselves. It's much, much better to have a few key pieces of core content and intellectual property and then simply keep repurposing that into different kinds of content bridges. Like Suzi, you don't need lots of content, core content, the equivalent of the growth zones, right?
No, and I think it actually gets confusing when you have a lot. And if you think of any thought leaders or known experts in any area, you'll notice they talk about the same thing over and over again in different areas. They don't talk about one thing and then introduce something that could be contradictory or spread themselves thin. They usually go deeper on the one thing, but come at it in a number of different ways. And so, I get confused when people just have so many different ideas. And I've seen people do that, like inside one book, having like multiple models. It's like, whoa. I don't know what you're doing here, So just stick to what is core. And not everything's going to be core. So what is core? And then where can you go from there?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, like, I have read books or seen presentations or training programs. There are so many models. I'm just lost. Whereas the whole idea of your core content, your frameworks, it's meant to simplify. It's meant to actually make the complex stuff easier to see than harder. And so by doing exactly what Suzi just said, which is having fewer models, fewer core contents, fewer of those, and just going deeper and repeating and finding new ways to unpack them or new content bridge formats. Like some people are going to really resonate with a podcast, and some people might resonate with an ebook. Some people want to read the longer, more detailed blog posts. Some people want the short, quick, bullet-pointed Facebook post version. So it can be really clarifying for our students, for our clients, for our prospects, because remember, we want to attract new people into our world. When we can find new and creative content bridges to keep covering and retracing and reinforcing our core content in interesting ways that will meet them where they're at. And remember, a content bridge could be a book, a website, a landing page, a blog, a Facebook ad, a webinar, a training, a podcast, DVDs, if people still make those anymore, a seminar. It could be a keynote address, an article, a social media post, a video, an online course, like you name it. A content bridge can be any of those things. It literally is what it says. It bridges, it connects your customer or your prospect with your core content in some sort of way that is going to meet them where they're at. Now, I just listed a whole bunch of things. We're not saying you have to do all of those different types of content bridges. We're just trying to kind of organize in your mind, look, I've got a little bit of IP, this kind of area that I have thought leadership in. I'm going to create just a small amount of core content, and then I'm going to really just focus on the right content bridges to reach my audience. And I don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel. I've just got to find one or two new content bridges from time to time where it makes strategic sense.
This is great. I'm really even thinking myself how, as I look into the next 6 months, how I could simplify even more. Because, having created content for 29 years since I started my first business, I'd likely have enough.
Right.
And you likely have enough too. If you're listening and you've been in business for a minute, you likely have enough, and if you have a powerful core framework, and we have a great episode on frameworks, Michelle. We really should link to it as well in this
Great
episode.
idea.
But Michelle makes a really important point. She didn't mention cassette tapes, but that's okay. We'll let her off the hook.
No tablets. Hard to post, though.
Hard to post, that's right. So Michelle's point really speaks to a universal idea that I'm really passionate about, and that you've heard me share many times before on the show, and that is this idea of do less and obsess, which has become our mantra inside of her business. And it's an idea inspired by Dr. Morton Hansen. He's a professor at Berkeley in California, and he's studied exemplars in sport, in academia, in science, in business, all across different sectors. And he found that those who are the most successful, they focused on fewer things and they obsessed about them. And it holds true in all areas of business, including repurposing content. You don't need 10 different courses and a coaching program and a membership and a physical product in terms of your paid programs. You just need a few things done well that you can go deeply on, obsessing over things like hitting your target numbers, really understanding your ideal clients, creating an amazing product or service that people tell their friends about, being efficient so it's more profitable. And that it's the same for free content you might want to share as part of your content marketing strategy. So you don't need a blog and a YouTube channel and an Instagram feed and 17 emails a week and a newsletter and a weekly vlog, 4 Facebook Lives, a Facebook group and a page, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And to be doing, challenges and all the things. It's much more effective to be selective about your content bridges. And I know this can be really hard to hear because we think that if we just do more and different, we're going to get better results. But that's not been our experience at all. Not inside of her business, not inside what we see in our wonderful Marketing Success Mastermind program. Too much new, too many moving parts makes it harder for you to gain traction. And as a small business owner, it also means it depletes your resources. And we've seen this firsthand, this idea that it's harder to do more. We've seen that firsthand with our masterminders. And many who, when they join the mastermind, they have more complex businesses than what they'll have 3 months in, like too many products, too many ideal clients. And they often go through this streamlining process, figuring out what they sell, what they want to sell, what brings them joy, what's profitable. And once they have that clear, the next thing is to streamline is the amount of content they're creating, whether it's repurposed or not. So remember our earlier point that it doesn't matter how efficiently you can create content. If it's not contributing to a conversion, then it's probably not needed. If it's not attracting, converting, or keeping your ideal clients, it's probably not needed. And now our masterminders have these wonderfully streamlined businesses that aren't driving them mad, that they can just rinse and repeat their campaigns and get amazing results, doubling, tripling their income. So let's say you've done the streamlining we're talking about and you've got a great plan to do less and obsess, and you're clear that the content you want to create is going to contribute to a conversion. Check, check, check. Now that we're at this point, we thought we'd share our top 3 repurposing tips. How does that sound?
Yeah. I love it, Suzi. Tell me, what are they?
All right. So I'll give you the first one. And tip number 1 is to generate your core content where there's least friction. And Michelle spoke to this earlier. And by that we mean, what is the easiest thing for you to do? Or what are you already doing that could make your core content? So for example, if you're doing a client presentation, can you record it and use the transcription as the basis for a great blog post or 3? Can you edit that recording and repurpose it into a value-add video you can share as part of your marketing? Could you create little 30-second snippets that become reels? For most of the year, I do a weekly podcast for the Her Business podcast, and we kind of alluded to that earlier. And that show is aligned to the growth zones. So we talk about marketing and sales and money and technology and people and products and services and all those things. But we also touch on the growth zone, which I think makes the most difference, which is the you growth zone, which is all about your mindset, which is a big part of what we teach and what is essential to business. And that content, those podcast episodes, they're going to inform the editorial in our newsletter, our social posts, a Facebook Live into the Her Business community, et cetera, et cetera. It becomes the starting point off which other things emanate. But as Michelle said, we could go the other way. We could take the podcast and make it in, create a webinar around it, or create, something bigger. But at the very least, we create the core content. That is it. That's kind of the cornerstone of our content creation on a weekly, monthly basis.
I do love that. And like in terms of like taking the podcast and going smaller, I love it when I can just go, oh, we've got done a podcast on that. And I can just go to our Google Doc, copy a whole slab of content and sort of paste it and make two or three quick tweaks and go,
yes.
Done.
Yes.
It's nothing better. And then speaking of going bigger, we do that too from the podcast, from this mutual podcast we do together. So often we'll hit on an idea on this show and we'll go, oh my gosh, there's so much more to this. And we'll go much deeper on it with our masterminders. We might create a half-day deep dive training. We might theme a whole 2-day of our two-day live meeting around a concept that we started talking about here on the podcast, and just sort of pulled a thread that we realized was connected to so much more. And we'll go back to the podcast and sort of look at those foundation ideas and really expand on them to create, even a 2-day program. So yeah, you can go both directions. You can kind of repurpose by chunking it down, or you can repurpose by going bigger. And Suzi, I just want to pick up on one thing you said there about really like, what is it you are already doing that could become this kind of starting point, this core content, or your turkey, if we want to go back to that metaphor before. So there's a couple of people that I know who, one of the things that all of us are already doing is life. Like we're already kind of doing our thing. We're getting on buses and planes and trains, and we're going to meetings, and we're, walking down the street and all of these things. Well, there's 2 people I know who have decided that is their core content. Like, I'm already doing this.
I'm already doing life.
Let's just kind of like repurpose that. And so one of them is the wonderful Elliot Connie, and he is a psychotherapist. He's a leading voice in the field of solution-focused brief therapy. And basically what he's done, he's in my mastermind group. We're in a group together in the US. And you were able to bring a guest to like the social functions and things like that. And his guest was his person. Like he has a person who accompanies him and takes video and photos. And when he's like standing there having a conversation with someone, if it's a really interesting conversation, she'll just film with permission, film the conversation. Or he'll be, just walking between the conference center and the dinner venue, and he'll have a great idea and he'll just start talking. And so while he's doing life, he is basically capturing all this incredible content, and he's posting it to social media, or to his team is using it to repurpose it to create blog posts. Like this is kind of taking this idea to the extreme. I realize not all of us are going to hire somebody to shadow us and repurpose our life, but it has resulted in a massive upgrade in his followers, like many, many thousands of followers. And again, it's not for nothing. It's not the vanity metric of I want hundreds of thousands of Facebook followers, for example. He is deliberately and strategically bringing those people into his marketing funnel for his courses, for his programs. And he's a man on a mission. He wants more people to hear what he's talking about. And he's seeing massive growth as a result of that strategy. Another person I know who does this is Kerwin Ray. He teaches on business and personal development training, and he does a similar thing. He'll often have people follow him around, and he is awesome at repurposing. He records everything. If he's doing a sales training for his team, if he's on a trip to the airport, he is recording content. He's capturing ideas, and then he's built a team around him to kind of take those ideas and run with them. But he's seeing the value.
I would hate that.
I know, right? Everybody
that's
else
what
might
we're
be going,
saying,
oh my
right?
God,
Yeah. No, but it's finding the thing that you're good at. I mean, it's like Gary Vaynerchuk. He, a similar thing. Like if that's the easiest for you to have someone follow you around, I'd just kick them.
Oh my gosh. Note to self, don't let Suzi hire you to follow her around and do any social media or content recording. That's right. Or wear shin pads. But like they see the value in that. And while I'm not going to have somebody follow me around, I think there's just, sometimes I can see an idea when I see someone doing it to the extreme. And so you've got lots of valuable content just lying around in your day-to-day in things you might already be doing. How can you harvest that? How can you find a way to make that your core content that you can then build a bunch of bridges from, or you can have others do it for you? And that really leads on to tip number 2, which is create a content repurposing system. Now, we've all heard from the dark ages of content marketing, we've got to repurpose. But I think the thing that's often missing is a very deliberate, consciously created system for repurposing. And what we've just shared in the episode so far, I think is a really solid foundation for this. And when you can get a repurposing system, this really is the holy grail of repurposing, but also I think of content marketing. So any plans that you might have to repurpose really need to be supported by a system in order for it to work, especially in any long-term sustainable way. So you want to know who does what, how do they do it, when do they do it? And you want to really find a way to document this and make sure everyone involved in the chain is clear on their part. So it could be a simple spreadsheet, it could be a Trello board, it could be a complex project management process. You might just have a Dropbox folder or whatever you're thinking of that you plonk stuff into, but then somebody knows to check that Dropbox folder every day. And here's the 3 things you do with what's in that Dropbox folder. So you really want to start thinking, if you're going to do repurposing, start thinking about a system. Now, you don't have to start with the big fully fledged system. I think that's actually the wrong way to go about it, because you're not quite sure often how things will work or what stuff's going to be easy, what stuff's going to be hard. So I recommend start simple, start small. And I want to give you an example of what simple and small looks like and just how powerful this can be. So a client of mine, she was really great at making these incredible slice of life videos that she would make just with the selfie on her phone. She'd just be walking down the street, get hit by inspiration, record a great video, or see something wonderful happening out there in the world and film it, and then record a video about how that's a metaphor for what it is that she does. I mean, these were really, really awesome videos. She would show them to me. I'd be like, you have to get these out into the world. But do you know where they stayed? Right there on her phone. These wonderful stories, these amazing observations, these things that were really perfect core content, because this was where the friction was not, right? This was where it was easy for her. So it was perfect core content that could be used as is on socials, but it could also be repurposed into emails, blog posts, quotes. This could turn into a book. Like, this is the whole turkey situation here on her phone. And what she realized was she was never going to do it. She was never going to actually do anything with what's in her phone. So she hired an assistant. She set up a process. She was deliberate. She was conscious about it. So now what happens is the videos on her phone go to her assistant, who then has a process for repurposing. So they take the content, they plan it into the content plan, and they decide, okay, just like what you were saying, Suzi, okay, we've got a campaign coming up that will be perfect for that, or we'll hold this back and use it as we're approaching our launch. And then she will also figure out, okay, we're going to create these 3 pieces of content from this. So we're going to make an email, we're going to post the video as it is, and we're going to make 3 or 4 sort of snippet, like quotable social posts from this. And then on the date that that piece of content goes out, it goes out as an email. Simultaneously, it gets posted to social media. And then over the next couple of days, the quotable sort of quotes go out as well, all linking back to the video. Now, that actually is not hard to do. All she's doing is making a video, putting it somewhere her assistant who's fully trained to do these just handful of things. And guess what's happening? It's no longer trapped on her phone. She's seeing massive growth in her list size, in the responsiveness of her existing list, because now she's sending them really good content, and in her conversion numbers, because when she does do a campaign, people go, I love what she posts. What is she doing? Yes, let me buy her thing. But here's the part. She's only still doing the very bit that she wants to do. But now she has a system and the support to get it done, and it's been an absolute game changer.
I love that. And I want to point out that at some point, she had a shift in her thinking about content marketing, about what it's going to take to get this content out to as many people as possible. And so finding someone to do it, that's kind of the easy part. Deciding you're going to stop doing it the way you're doing it. You're going to stop just going, oh my gosh, I've got all this great content. It's on my phone. I really should do something about it. And actually saying, okay, we just need a system. Like, you had to make the mind shift first. And that for all of us as we're listening to this, I think is a really great lesson, is like, what is the shift that you need to make to have more sustainable content marketing? And it's repurposing is part of it. And we're saying it ought to be, then what are the systems that you need in place? Because it's so important to get those systems in place in the first place. I think I said place 4 times in one sentence. So
you can place wherever you want.
So an example of one of our repurposing systems is to create the podcast, the blog post, the editorial for the newsletter, the social posts, all in one sitting. So while sometimes I will get team to help with that, to be honest, some days it's just like, okay, I've just done this podcast. The show notes are there. I'm just going to repurpose that while I'm there. And then I'll use something even like ChatGPT and say, hey, here's the transcript. Give me 3 social posts. I'll clean them up and then I'll pass them on. And so then the publication of, creating the Canva images and getting the things scheduled, all that someone else is doing. But our system is like, I do some, you do some. And that we split that between the team. And we have a project management system, and that's where all the tasks get assigned to different people. So I'm doing the bit I love. I'm doing a couple of bits that I don't mind. Otherwise, I really wouldn't do them, but they could definitely be leveraged. Yeah.
But great example, right, of who does what, how do they do it, and when. Like, that's really all we're talking about with a system. Sometimes I think people hear system and they think it's going to be some highfalutin thing. No, just making sure, here's how we do it. Here's the 5 steps. Now, who's doing what? How are they going to do that? And when are they going to do that? And what's how do I know when you're ready? And just getting clear on that can be absolutely game changing. And another person, Suzi, that I'm thinking of, who we did an interview is the Wealth Chef, Anne Wilson. And she's a great example of this. She also just does the part she loves. She puts the content, the core content, in a Dropbox folder. That's her system. And her team is trained to just keep checking that Dropbox. And then she's got a little documented process for the various content bridges that get created from that core content. And she's got a content machine. Again, Anne is only doing the part she loves. And I do suggest we'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. You may want to go back and listen to that one. It's a goodie.
Yeah, very, very good. It was a great interview. I remember that. All right, fabulous. So we have one more repurposing tip, and this one is a bit of a doozy. One we could revisit again later with its own dedicated episode. Like we said, we could make more of this idea, but we want to touch on it briefly today, and that is to leverage AI. And I just kind of mentioned it in my last thing I was saying there. Now, we do have an AI episode you can check out if you want more on this topic right now, and you can find it at episode 207, which is titled How AI is Changing the Game for Small Business Owners. And there are some fabulous tools that can help you with repurposing. A couple that we're really loving right now. One, Michelle, you introduced me to this one, is Humata. It's either called Humata or Humata, but it's Humata. And it's a great one because you can upload any source material you want to it. So let's say you have a podcast transcript, and if it's too many words to load into something like ChatGPT, which has a relatively low token limit, but you can have thousands of words in a PDF document and load that up to Humata. And then that tool basically treats the data you've uploaded as the source material for whatever your request is. It's so good. So it works like ChatGPT, but instead of going into the ChatGPT language model to answer your question, it goes to your source data. So you'll say, look at this document and create something. So you can say, take this 5,000 word podcast transcription and give me 3 blog posts or 20 social media posts, or go through and find 20 tweetable quotes, or give me 6 bullet points that are the main themes. We used it recently to go through a meeting transcript and pull out the important ideas. I used it recently when we ran our Business Growth Summit for women entrepreneurs, and I thought, okay, we need to have the copy for the landing page based on this transcription. And so we did something similar to what I just said. Here's the transcription. Give me an intro, an outro, and give me 6 bullet points. Tell me what the key theme is. Tell me a quote from something they said, which is really powerful, that we could use in social. And so it just sped things up. And it was repurposing the content. But the sky really is the limit in how you might use a tool like this to repurpose content. Now, you still have to be a smart marketer and look at it, make sure it says, it says what is on brand for you and that it's really speaking to your ideal customer. But it is really a game changer because it just speeds repurposing up so much.
Yeah, I really, the sky is the limit. I mean, it could be, you might have a course right now. Like, you said before, Suzi, we've all already got enough content and the tools are really starting to come along now that agree with us and say, yes, you have enough content. Let's just keep repurposing it and reslicing and dicing it. So you might have a course that's a 6-hour course, a 6-week course. You could get the transcripts from that, load it into a tool like Humata, and then create all kinds of other content bridges out of it, other paid programs like what Ruth Basinski's doing, or other free content that you might create in your marketing funnel to attract people into your world, or a webinar that you use as like a conversion event. If you're running Facebook Lives, maybe you've had a Facebook group and you've got 3 years worth of Facebook Lives in there. Well, go and get them transcribed and see what other content you can create out of it. Those voice memos on your phone. I mean, you could load anything into a tool like this. I absolutely love it. Another tool, which is kind of same but different, and does a lot more as well. But it's this idea that instead of like ChatGPT going out to its big language model, you create your own ecosystem based on your own content. And this one is absolutely fantastic. It's Wisdom AI made by the team at Searchy, which, the wonderful person behind that is, or one of the wonderful people behind that is Stu McLaren, who Suzi and I both know and love. And here's what's really awesome about this tool, and I do suggest you go and check it out. We'll put a link into today's show notes. But it's basically able to create an AI version of you in terms of the content you've already put out there in the world. So basically, on this show today, we're going to give you a little tip on how repurposing yourself. And so what it does is if you've got a whole bunch of content that's already out there, you can load it into Searchy, into this, using this tool called Wisdom AI, and create your own universe of content. And let me give you an example. So we're testing it right now with, we've got 220 episodes so far and counting of the Content Sells podcast. Now that has become, using the tool like using the Wisdom AI tool, its own little universe of content. And we've been testing this out. You can go and ask this tool, which is basically like asking Suzi and I, like you might say, what are your top tips on repurposing? Or what do I do when I'm trying to understand who my ideal client is? And it will go buzz, 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 buzz through all of our previous content and give an answer, kind of like the answers you see ChatGPT do when it goes buzz, 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 looking at all of the source material it has. But the answer is just based on what Suzi and I have said on this show.
So good.
Oh, the applications of that are just incredible. But look at that. That is a form of repurposing. It's taking work we've already done, using the power of AI to simply dig into that and find the right answer and provide an answer. And I've really been trying to stump virtual Suzi and Michelle and asking like really cryptic questions. Like I think it would be easy for it to answer, tell me 3 repurposing strategies, because it could just kind of go to this episode, right? But I've been trying to ask like meta questions that might spread across lots of different shows and with quirky kind of, and it's just nailing it every single time. So do go and check out Wisdom AI. Do go and check out the Searchy tool in general. It's absolutely incredible. And just one other tool that I want to mention is Canva is doing a lot with AI. So I'm imagining if you're listening, you've probably done something with Canva, which is basically started as kind of like a graphic design tool. And it's really kind of got so much functionality now. They're doing a lot with AI, text generation, image generation. And one of the things I want to mention is a tool called Bulk Create. It's inside of Canva. And you can do all sorts of things with this, but just as an example, you might, using a tool like Humata, go and say, hey, go into my podcast and generate 20 short quotes. And then you just copy that and paste it into a spreadsheet using the CSV format, which is easy. Any spreadsheet tool will do that for you. You upload that those 20 quotes to Canva using this bulk create, and you choose one image that you might like, a quote graphic design that you like, and you basically just with a couple of buttons say, okay, take all of those 20 quotes and turn them into this design. And like bibbity bobbity boop, in like seconds, you now have 20 posts, all beautifully designed. You've not done a single cut and paste.
Yeah.
And then if you do that with like 4 or 5 different designs, you might do 10 posts with that design, 10 posts with this design. You can have like a whole year's worth of beautiful graphic designed quotes of your own work, like in seconds, from like finding it in your podcast to uploading it to Canva to finished output. It's just absolutely incredible. And we talk about this in more detail, this bulk create idea in Canva, and we include a link to an instructional video on this if you are interested in learning more on that in episode 213, which is 11 content marketing tools we're loving.
I love that. And I haven't played with that for a while. So I'm going to go and check that one out again, but I'm loving Humata. We're going to give you one more tool, and that is Fathom, Fathom. It's a plugin for Zoom, and what it does is it takes meeting notes and automatically summarizes them. So you could record yourself on Zoom as your core content, like you might be delivering a key training or just speaking about your core content, and have it instantly create summaries for you. And I want to just mention that episode that Michelle referred to, we covered a lot of our favorite tools for this year in our annual content marketing tools we're loving episode. So go ahead, and it's a really great partner episode for this one, and there's a great download in that as well. So you can find that over in episode 213, which is 11 content marketing tools that we're loving. So we hope that we've whet your appetite for repurposing, or if you're doing repurposing now, that we've got you thinking about whether you need all the content you're creating and how you might do less and obsess and create more effective systems around your content repurposing. We love repurposing when it's done well and when it's about supporting conversion versus just keeping you busy in the hamster wheel of content creation. We have a special link where you can access all the resources, all the episodes we mentioned on today's show. But before we do that, we love sharing the tips on this show with as many business owners as possible. So we would love it if you would leave us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts. We have over 100 5-star reviews. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we would love it if you would head across there and leave us a review. And here's why it's important. We do want to help as many people as possible with the strategies that we bring to this show. And when someone goes to Apple and they're looking for a podcast to listen to and they see a great review, it really helps them say, oh, yeah, I'm going to try this out. Suzi and Michelle sound like they know what they're talking about. Let me check this one out. One of our regular listeners is the lovely Chandra Moran from the Transit Lounge. She also happens to be our member of the year here at Her Business. And she was recently listening to an episode that has been mentioned by so many people. It's about overthinking. She said, the Overthinking podcast was brilliant. So great, and definitely hitting on a big issue as we've been talking about it with my group. And that it means her Women in Transit group. That is her membership. She said there were so many instances of questions on our Q&A calls that we made a joke about changing the group name to Overthinkers Anonymous. Thank you so much, Chandra. I'm very happy to give you a shout out on the show to say thank you for leaving that review. And we highly recommend that episode as well. And we will put a link to it in the show notes, as well as anything else we mentioned here on the show. So you'll find those show notes over at herbusiness.com/repurpose. That's herbusiness.com/repurpose, all one word. Michelle, what do we have coming up in the next episode?
We're on a bit of a systems theme, and based on what we've talked about on today's show, maybe you can understand why, because it happens to be the systems growth zone for Suzi inside of Her Business as well. And so we're letting you behind the scenes a little bit of what we're doing here, some of the magic tricks. So our next episode is 3 easy marketing systems that could save you hours every week. We're going to be revealing what those 3 marketing systems are and really just demystifying. You do not have to be, a complex systems thinker. You don't have to have complex software to really benefit from systems. And Suzi, you're such a great role model for the power of systems. I've learned so much from you about systemizing, and I'm looking forward to that episode next week.
Yeah, that's coming up real soon. So be sure to click. Thank you, firstly, Michelle, for your compliment. Go ahead and click subscribe wherever you're listening, and that episode will be right there the moment it drops. Michelle, anything you want to say before we go today?
Well, firstly, I said next week because I was thinking about saving hours every week, and it won't be next week, but look out for when that drops. But I do want to say something you said, and it's going to carry with me after this session, where you said, you know what? We probably all have enough content. And so I just want to say, as you're listening right now, even if you're relatively new to your business, you have enough. You have enough. And so let's just do less and obsess. Let's figure out how we can not have to go and reinvent the wheel, and let's get more repurposing, strategic repurposing happening.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time right here on the Content Sells podcast. Bye for now.